or you mentioned a lot of this about the Chicano culture of Mexicans, especially in the US, that it was different, and I always saw it's like this kind of masculine ideal in the Mexican culture. And one of my favorite movies as a young man, as a teenager, of course, the epic Chicano gangster drama called Blood In, Blood Out, and I guess you know about this movie.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Great film.
yeah, it is. And I'm thinking about European men, white men, especially in an emasculated country like Sweden, with all those feminist so-called men afraid of everything, losing much of their identity, not only as whites but also as men as well. I feel we have something to learn here. What is your take on this? Like this masculine identity and or could you tell us a bit about the Chicano identity?
Sure. Well, the Chicano culture essentially comes from immigration, you know, especially after the Second World War, with many of the Mexican immigrants coming through and settling up around California, especially. A culture started growing, and minorities will grow in gangs, and they would essentially have it to, you know, better the community and to help defend those in their community. And I've heard those refer to, you know, what Chicano gangsters are also known as are cholos, and they refer to cholo Mexican skinheads. That's pretty much a pretty accurate description of what they are. And as there's even some Mexican skinheads in prisons that are affiliated with the Aryan Nation. So there is some kind of gap there, but Chicano culture, in a sense, is trying to make sense of the Mexican culture and the American identity, and trying to live in harmony in both of it. But any of it has to do with Catholicism too. That's why you do see in Chicano culture, you know, a lot of it's really influenced by that. Like you'll see, you know, murals of the Virgin Mary and all that, and that has to go back to ancestral times. You know, having to go back to where we were indoctrinated into worshiping, you know, the Jewish faith and the figures like of the Bible. And as saints or what have you. And in the Chicano culture, they really try to honor the old while remembering, you know, honoring the past, but also trying to stay relevant to what they have been taught. So you'll see a lot of those things, and it's the Chicano culture. It's I mean, if you were to go, it's really hard to explain unless you've seen it, but once you've seen it, you know exactly what it is. But it's a lifestyle, and they're portraying towards the Latino community, essentially Mexican American. And it's something that grew out of desperation, you know, like a lot of other things. But that film really does well to show the struggle of, you know, the average Chicano of that period, you know, have to deal with either joining a gang or having to defend, you know, people around you who are from your community. And a lot of individuals will look down upon that because it is gang culture. It is seen as degenerate and all that. But in its true essence, it was really about community, and it's really about culture. And many of what is in the fashion and the tattoos and all that is very derivative to the culture, even to the prison systems in Chicano prisons, that they speak the Aztec language, Nahuatl, to, you know, send messages without guards being tipped off. You know, it's very ingrained in whether they know it or not as far as other Chicanos, but they are for the most part, because there's even some significant Mayan or, you know, Mexica Aztec tattoos that an individual, a Chicano, will earn if they do certain things in prison, if they do certain things for their raza. So these things are always going to be tied down to culture as far as raza, but it's one of those phenomenons that's, you know, unless you really know someone who's from that culture or experience a little bit yourself, you're not really going to understand. And one of the few things that, you know, Blood In, Blood Out did do well is give people not from Chicano culture a good glimpse of what it is and what happens on a normal basis.
Yeah, because I don't know if it's so degenerate with gang culture itself. I mean, I think it's the society that's degenerate, and
Yeah.
it because if you watch that movie, it's a lot about pride, like pride in your heritage, and about loyalty and being a
Yes.
warrior and brotherhood. And the only problem I have, of course, and this is a problem with all those Hollywood prison movies, is that the white Aryans, they're always the most homosexual, wanting to rape other men. It's always like that. Yeah, it's it's always like that. But otherwise, I mean, it's not. I mean, they don't portray the gang thing as something negative or really like degenerate, and not something positive, but just something that is kind of necessarily happening in the context in which the movie is happening. And yeah, I really enjoyed that movie a lot, and I would recommend it to anyone listening to this, actually. And I think like the whole thing, like with a minority, like not being to become like a member of a gang like that, is actually not to be victimized. It's like taking control of maybe a neighborhood or something, and not giving a damn about the society around you that's degenerate. Of course, there are people that, of course, they're gang members that doing bad things, but like protecting your people somehow. It's sometimes I wish that Swedish people would do the same thing in Sweden, you know.
Well, it was like during this whole George Floyd rioting, and even to this lockdown for the COVID that you just experienced here in the U.S. I don't know if you're very much aware, but in the region of Chicago, in the state of Illinois, here in the States, there was pretty much a race war between the Black community and the Hispanic community of Chicago. And it's pretty essentially what was happening is during all of these riots, the Black Lives Matter organization members or supporters, who what have you, they would go into these Latino communities and ruin the businesses, steal from the businesses, burn structures down in these Latino communities. And these Latino gangs got together and started fighting them off. They started essentially having gun battles out in the street and shooting each other dead. And it was going on for quite some time, and it wasn't really publicized as much as it should have been, just because you know how the liberal media likes to portray things. Nothing bad is happening unless it's coming from Trump or unless it's coming from white people. So it's just one of those things that gets swept under the rug. But yeah, very much so. The Chicano community in general, it's very protective towards its own. There's an expression, you know, that you mess with one bean, you get the whole burrito, as far as, you know, you're messing with the Mexican community. And it's pretty true. You know, we support each other when it counts. And that aspect that I see, you know, from gang culture and communities like that it gives me hope, and it makes me feel right to say that, you know, under the right circumstances, leadership and all that, you know, some kind of, you know, Chicano nationalism, Cecilia, as I kind of says this out loud, is something that is more possible than not. You know, it just takes, you know, like I've always mentioned, time is something that's always a factor. What doesn't work now might work in 20 years. It just depends on the struggle of the structure of each society and subgroup within the, you know, the racial bounds of these sub pockets in American society. You really can't really protect much of the future, but you know what I can say for sure is, like, you know, from statistically speaking, they're saying roughly around 2045 or so white European descendants in the U.S. Are going to be the minority, and it's going to be Latino and Blacks that are going to be the two most like, I guess we will be the majority by that time. And, you know, the Latino and the Blacks, but more or less the Latinos, and that will be a problem potentially for us in the past, or well, not in the past, in the future, coming up in the future, because like I said, during trial times or trying times, like what was happening here during the whole Black Lives Matter things, like these two racial groups, Latino and Black, were essentially at war with one another for this period, and if things are going to be, as they predict to be in the future, with whites being the minority and, more political figureheads and governmental office being more Latino and Black, what's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. One can only speculate, but I can say that if more Latinos, more those of the Bronze race, Mesoamericans in general, if they were to really start not victimizing themselves and be really in tune with the pride, in 20 years, things could be different from what the liberal agenda is, because right now it's just multicultural this and that, and Black and brown unity to against the evil white racist government and all this stuff. And it's at the end of the day, it's when everything's said and done, and let's say the whites are a minority, the liberals get what they want, and everything is ran by Latinos and Blacks in the future. It's who's to say, even though this is technically Mesoamerican land, who is to say that the Black community will be as friendly? It's war has shown that after war is over, those who helped you, your allies, they're going to want a piece of land, they're going to want a piece of something for helping you. So that is the reason why I believe each race should be very self-sufficient. It's not rely on others so much. Of course, when it comes to nationalism, global nationalist alliances are important to find the common evil enemy. But when it comes to running, some kind of harmonized nation, where everything's more or less the same, racially, it's a lot more difficult to run something in that aspect. If you were to go to Asia, if I want to become an Asian citizen, like let's say in Japan, I'm not going to make them change the laws so they could, embrace my culture and embrace, things that I'm used to. I would have to, be accustomed to Japanese law. Same thing if we were to go to Europe, and that's part of this immigration issue, I'm sure, for Europe too, is you're getting those coming from the Middle East where degrading women and raping them in public is more acceptable in their, countries than it is in Europe. But, they get a slap on the wrist for doing it in Europe because, they're from a different culture. No, that's not the right way. Whatever country you're visiting or being a part of, you must abide by what they expect. If not, you can leave or, just go somewhere else essentially. But,
yeah,
that's something that cannot be accomplished, with, like I said, with what the liberals want here in the U.S., which is, whites becoming a minority in the future, and then today's minorities being future leaders and expecting everything to just be okay, because it won't be.
No, it won't be. But the thing, with the Chicano culture, if you compare it to Europe, we have, like in Sweden, we have had an almost Marxist government since we had democracy in Sweden, and they broke down the family ties and the ties, the cultural ties, and all our ties again towards our ancestors and our culture, and they like destroyed it all. We have almost no Swedish culture anymore. And then we have people coming, as you said, from the Middle East that are also like that. They protect each other. And then if a Swede get into conflict with a guy from the Middle East, he can never win the conflict, because the guy from the Middle East, he has his cousins and it's his countrymen, and his he has always like the backup that's needed to win a conflict. And the Swede, he has nothing. He has some friends that runs away, and his family, he can't count on them or anything. And then the Swedes, they're like, they have to bring their cousins and everything. But I always say, this is the right way. This is how we should do it instead. Instead of complaining about this kind of tribal behavior, we should think, why don't we have this tribal behavior ourselves? And that's why I like this kind of movies, because there's no movies about white people doing that, perhaps except for like old movies about, you know, old times in Europe or something like that. But there's no white people today basically that's doing that, except for nationalists trying to group themselves and protect themselves. So I think it's very interesting with this Chicano culture. And I was going to ask you, except for this movie Blood In Blood Out, is there any other like books or movies or even TV series that you would recommend that you think in a just way portray this kind of culture without it being portrayed in a like political correct way as victims, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, another two films that I really do like is My Family, which is also known as Mi Familia. It pretty much talks about the journey of crossing over here with having a child, starting the American dream, but as a Chicano, and some of the things within the Chicano culture that comes with it, like the gang culture and being kind of separate from the white American culture, but trying to like incorporate that life with your culture, you know. And that movie is great. Let's see. American Me is also great as well. It also has Edward James Olmos in it. That movie, pretty much, it's the same kind of thing, talking about Chicanos, but under the more educational kind of umbrella, kind of a film showing the struggles of the Chicano and the school system and all that, and doing better. But I would say another one is, I forget who directs it, but the film Colors. It's a gang culture movie called Colors, and it deals with the Chicano culture and gangs as well, and it kind of gives a glimpse of that. And that one is probably one of my favorite gang movies of all time, Colors, and I recommend those for sure. As far as literature, it's like I said, it's very hard for me to recommend or dive deep into the literature because much of it is just so is just so filled with propaganda, you know, leftist propaganda. And like, there's only so much of that I could read before, you know, I really begin to lose interest in like a good story, you know? Yeah, of course, those three films, I recommend, you know, if you just want to know a little bit more about Chicano culture or just want to just watch a good movie in general, I definitely recommend those three.
Speaking of tribalism and Mesoamerican culture, one of my favorite movies is Apocalypto by let's call him woke person, Mel Gibson. Yes. If I'm not mistaken, is not the weapon Maquahuitl in some way featured in that movie, or I might be wrong about that. So,
yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
So if anyone wants to see how that weapon looks in action, check that movie out and support Mel Gibson's work.
Yes. Mel Gibson is a great man. It's he got shadow banned everywhere from the evil forces, as we like to call them here. But he's a man of conviction, to say the least. And I've actually, when I was touring in Mexico a couple of years ago, I did meet someone who worked on the set of Apocalypto and did the makeup for some of the indigenous actors there and stuff like that, and like told me about, you know, some crazy stories doing that. But yeah, it was filmed in Mexico. It was filmed in Chiapas, which is the southernmost region of Mexico, and I believe other regions of the Yucatan as well, which is the southeastern area of Mexico. But yeah, that community is more Mayan than anything. But yeah, I mean, it's a great film. It's as far as historical accuracy is not as much, because by the time you know, the Europeans came, there wasn't really much of the Mayan Empire. At that time, the Mayans had pretty much diminished to just being a large, as you could call like a large Native American merchant tribe. They pretty much had the largest trade networks of any indigenous group from, you know, Canada all the way down to, you know, South America, and traveling and having dialects to communicate with different tribes and all that. But as far as like the weaponry and, you know, speaking the Mayan language, they did a terrific job. Personally, myself, I don't speak any dialects of Mayan, and majority of things that I study is more Mexica or Aztec mythology, but Mayan and Mexica mythology go hand in hand. As far as some of the deities, are the same god, but different names for the same god, and so on and so forth. But the weaponry is fantastic in that movie. It's very, very historically accurate the way that they're portrayed, and showcasing some of the devastation of it too. Like that hunting scene in the beginning of that movie is one of my favorite scenes of all time, just because it's showing, a bunch of pretty much Native Americans working together to hunt for the game, and how it was done, So yeah, I highly recommend that film as well, even though it's not historically accurate as far as visually and periodically. It's not. It's good enough to get some idea of what ancient Mexico was like.
You have another musical project called Sturmgewehr together with Pogrom SS from the band Nocturne. Sturmgewehr, as the name would hint, deals with National Socialism and the history of the Third Reich. Could you tell us a little about the band and what made it come together and what your motivation with the themes and so forth are?
Sure. Well, going back to what I stated previously when I was first beginning to write black metal back in 2008 or so, I was writing riffs for just myself, and I kind of realized that I was writing in two different styles. One became, me focusing on Maquahuitl and it developing into that band and project. But with Sturmgewehr, like it was my first attempt in black metal. Like when I was recording the first Sturmgewehr demo, some of the songs that didn't make the demo ended up being for the first Maquahuitl demo. So Sturmgewehr was very much on the radar first for me, because when I got into National Socialism, I first got into it, like we talked about, how on the surface level of German Third Reich, romanticism and all of that. So with this project, it was just, to me, just another NSBM project for me to really just be over the top and just really just do my thing. And the first demo is only two tracks, but it's me doing everything. It's even me on vocals. But after doing that, and when I decided to revitalize the project, I decided, to even make it more different from Maquahuitl, I had to have someone else join. And when I did that, I had no one else really in mind other than Gabriel. When I met him, he was very young. I think he was like 17 years old, going on 18, and he wasn't even running his label yet, nor was he a member of Nocturne. And he approached me first as a fan from other bands that I was doing, and we became friends. He became someone that I trusted and somebody who I really resonated with as a comrade. We listened to a lot of the same NSBM bands. We lived pretty close to each other, and he would always come over and hang out with me and my band members at our band practices, and he would be at our shows. So he was the first individual that I really wanted to work with. And this was really when he wasn't really known for being a Nocturne yet. When I asked him to join Sturmgewehr to do music together, he at first was a little hesitant to do it, but I told him, just no pressure, man. We're friends. Let's just get this shit done. And we did, and the first full length that we did, which is honestly the only full album that we have, is very special to me. A lot of those riffs and song titles are really a product of just us fucking around, especially the song titles. We wanted to make something that was very tongue-in-cheek, that was very almost comical, but still having the music to back it up, that this isn't just all silly bullshit like a lot of other NSBM bands are, that that never get anywhere past a garage demo that sounds like shit. We wanted to have music that sounded great, but having lyrical subjects that to the eye passing by, they would think it was just bullshit or just like funny song titles, just be funny. But the Pogrom did a really good job of really writing about things that he wanted to express in his National Socialist views. For example, one of the songs, he talks about the French Legion of Charlemagne, I believe it is, and it talked about that. Well, I can't speak freely on it because I don't know 100%, but I know it's about that pretty much that period and that musical subject, or that time subject. And the name of the song is called like Tour de France 1941 or something, just because it's based in France. Just like it's really just it was just something to do, just to have fun and to try to make some of the best black metal NSBM black metal that people have heard in quite some time, and I'm very proud of it. And the split that we did afterwards, are just leftover songs that were from that album, and that we've re-released the full-length album, including those split material songs, and that's out on LP now. I've merged Hasveg has it, and Merchant of Death, I believe as well. I'm not 100% sure, but Hasveg for sure has it. And I got notification a while ago that people are starting to receive their LPs, which makes me happy. And getting a lot of people telling me that they enjoy it, especially with this variation with a different cover and to having, you know, the split material with Secessionists on it to really complete it, you know. And I am currently working on some more Sturmgewehr music, and I'm actually going to be recording for that in a couple of months here, and as well as other stuff from Maquahuitl. But yes, this project was just, you know, made solo, and it was this original idea, and it just, you know, evolved into me working with a very good friend of mine and just really having fun and just having a good old time with it.
back a bit to the bronze movement and the musical scene, could you tell us a little bit about the history behind it, how it started and came to fruition, so to speak?
Sure. Well, the very first, like I said, label to really start this thing off was the ONSP in Mexico. But I would say, as far as the imagery wise, there was a band from Mexico called War Command, and I believe it was in 1995 or 6 where they released an album which had a eagle with an Aztec swastika on there, and that was the very first time it was used, and it became a thing. Because prior to that, like I've mentioned, the only thing you had that was Mesoamerican Mexico black metal was Xibalba, and they spoke about Mayan culture and subjects, but they weren't political. They weren't political at all. But War Command was the first one to really be that way and had that kind of imagery. And the ONSP, that label really did create the standard to that movement. But going across the border into the United States, I believe first significant band to really do something here that was grabbing the attention from others was this project from Los Angeles called Blood Order, and they called themselves Nicantlaka Resistance and black metal, and they did a split with Blood Division, which was a band that I was later involved in. But that release, I consider it the very first true Bronze NS album coming from the U.S. And he also, his name is Nick, I believe, the man that I spoke to that was behind Blood Order, and he has told me himself that the project was giving up. Many at the time did not see the vision. This is back in 2009 when this was going on, and like I've mentioned, the white Europeans were not very accepting of the bronze scene yet and what we were trying to do, and I can see how naturally died down for him and all that. But Blood Order really did do a lot, and going into what I'm doing now, there's been a couple of other bands that I've tried, but mainly from Mexico, and you do have the Black Twilight Circle, those individuals in that as well. And even though they're not really considered bronze nationalists as far as the music and associated with the ONSP and all that, there are completely two different entities. I do see that they do have some kind of foothold in this kind of music that I'm a part of as well, and what the ONSP has done and what the other bands like Blood Order and War Command have done, and to elevate the scene and to bring more attention towards it.
Yeah, interesting. And there seems to have been a growing trend especially in the last few years, of what usually, as far as I have seen, is characterized as native black metal, or like we talked earlier, indigenous black metal. Mm-hmm. And of course, they often thematically center around typically non-white and often minority groups and the culture and history pertaining to that. And there seems to be like two different categories, with one side being like political, nationalistic, and another side being apolitical, or at least hiding their political stance within the band. How do you regard this? Do you agree that this is something that has exploded in the last few years? And what do you think that, what is the origin of that in your opinion? And would you put yourself in the same label, perhaps if we don't use the term native?
Sure. Well, the other bands of the indigenous black metal movement, or just scene in general, a lot of them are not political at all. I mean, I believe besides myself and the ONSP, the rest of them don't really include politics in their message and in their music, which, I mean, for myself, I'm not a fan of, but I mean, people are people. I mean, they are going to represent themselves in their music the best way that they can, but I feel that the reason why these bands are afraid to make that nationalist leap forward is because they want to be a band that tours. They want to be a band that makes money. They want to be somebody that has a lot of fans and just really wants to, I don't want to say be accepted, because I don't think anyone makes music so people could like them, but they want their music to be accessible to everyone, where I see things quite the opposite. If anything, I've made my music as least accessible as possible by working with bands that are either exclusively NSBM or just labels that nobody likes, just for the simple fact that I don't want the wrong people to get a hold of it, because with these indigenous black metal scene and their bands, they are attracting leftists, Marxists, and those that are pretty much parasitic in their ideology, and they're incorporating that with indigenous identity and calling it pride, but it's anything but pride. As I've mentioned, it's victimization, and the key thing is you can't have victimization and be empowered. It's impossible, you know. But victimization is being totally powerless, and then you're being empowered, like by expressing some kind of, you know, pride and you know, being whatever race you are. I mean, that's the reason why with this indigenous scene, it's got to be all in or not, you know. If they want to just be seen as just like a pagan aspect of black metal for their indigenous tribe or for their Mesoamerican culture, sure, you know, they may do that or whatever, but when they have song titles that suggest killing white people or killing white settlers or oppressors, invaders, and you're afraid to make that nationalist gap because you don't want to be seen as racist, or play with my band or play with other bands that are like quote unquote sketchy, you're really doing it for show in other people's eyes, you know. And you may not. Some of these people might have the best intentions with their indigenous black metal bands, but they are really hindering the growth of the movement by just dipping their toes in what's allowed to be racist while being liberal, which is white hate, you know. But like I've mentioned, you know, I've not preached that kind of blind hatred towards white nationalists, and yet majority of my fans are either white nationalists or bronze nationalists. And these indigenous groups, they do have white liberal fans, and some of them are their friends, and I'm assuming that's the reason why they portrayed it that, where, you know, since I've really started taking this project seriously 2011, I've been unwavering in my stance. I've always been all in, and I've never tiptoed or been lukewarm, but you get these individuals in the indigenous scene that are being lukewarm. So I do not include myself in that, because a lot of them, it's more than just one individual band, but there's some indigenous black metal projects that I know for a fact don't want to play with me or don't want to be associated with me. Like, they'll message me in private or an email saying, you know, hey, I liked your recent album, or, you know, you and I are friends and all this stuff, but they do not want to share the stage with me, or they do not want to be associated with me in public. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's not something that upsets me, because I know who my true friends are. I know who my true allies are. And people see through the bullshit, whether it's me or fans or people from the outside, from the outside peripherals of the scene looking in. You know, people know how to spot bullshit, how to spot someone being disingenuous, someone being opportunistic, you know. So that's the reason why with these individuals that are lukewarm with me and these bands that are within the indigenous scene, I just ignore it now. I just do what I feel that must be done, which is just better my music and better the way that I represent, you know, the bronze race and Mesoamerican pride in general.
Yeah, good point. And for me personally, I don't expect every band to be like openly nationalistic, but I would expect people to distance themselves from the left who are trying to hijack the black metal scene a lot in the last few years and this would be especially vulnerable for the reasons that you took up, with being quote unquote native minority groups. The left would most certainly want them to be like their pets to use for their agenda, which for me, totally goes against everything that's connected to black metal and the spirit behind it. And I think that everyone has an obligation to distance themselves from those parasites who's trying to ruin the scene from within.
Yeah. And in that aspect, I mean, some of these projects that do not want to be associated with me by any sense, they're doing me a favor. I mean, I don't need their fans becoming my fans. I don't need to have more. I mean, I'm not making this music to have everyone be my friend or everyone be a fan of my music. That's not the point of me doing this. And I believe once you start caring about that, it's no longer black metal. Once you start caring, what anyone else but yourself thinks about who you play with, who you associate with, how you express your pride or your hatred. If you start limiting those things, like it's no longer genuine. It's the complete opposite of that. So these people are just hindering themselves and their growth within the scene. And people don't forget, man. I mean, like I said, even though it's not a personal thing for me, people who are fans of the genre, people who are aware, of what's going on in this scene, they're going to remember who was, more PC and who just didn't give a fuck, because in the end of the day, and that's what the black metal mentality is, it's just total disregard for anything but what you feel is correct and what you feel is right. And if for some people, if that means they're afraid to express their nationalistic views, they're afraid to show true pride in their culture, and so be it, but every man is responsible for their actions, for their words, for things that they say and how they portray themselves. So all I have to say to those kind of individuals is good luck, and I just hope that you wise up, because it's at the end of the day, it's your reputation and the reputation of your project that's really at stake.
Yeah, good points.
Yeah, it's those who are lukewarm that go back and forth with associations. They're the ones that at the end of the day, people just totally just abandon them, and any explanation they try to give, that's the thing with the black metal too. Once a black metal band starts giving explanations of saying they're not NS anymore or they never were stuff, they're pretty much done, for the most part. Maybe not within their constituents of the liberal scene, but as far as the true root heartbeat of their fan base, they're pretty much done. And I for example, for me personally, something that struck me that way, that was a total letdown for a National Socialist band to really 180 and abandon their past, for me, was Nocturnal Mortem. When Nocturnal Mortem did that, I mean, I believe that was a devastating blow to the scene, where all of a sudden, I do not know the main member's name, but he started disassociating himself from politics and that movement of the Slavic movement of any kind of affiliation. So those kind of things, you see happen once things like money and fame and opportunity to play these festivals come up, and it's disappointing, and I would just hope that bands notice these things and they know that they have to just stay the path, and they can't just buckle at the knees at any sign of somebody being against vocally of what they're preaching as far as their own political views or their own message,
Yeah, of course. And historically, leftists have claimed non-whites minorities as their own.
Oh yeah.
And we talked about this, like victims being used in their struggle to destroy basically not only the white civilization but all civilization. And this native black metal movement reacting the cultural Marxist ideology of victimhood, does it have potential? Do you think it has potential to grow outside the Of course, it already exists outside the musical scene, but we're talking about it here. Do you think that minorities, as yourself being a minority in the United States, can adapt this instead of like the Black Lives Matter movement? They are just tapped into that cultural Marxist ideology. Instead of fighting for their own pride, they're just portraying themselves like victims, just playing that game,
Yeah, well, I believe that is just really deep rooted in the modern indigenous identity to be a victim. like I understand this. I understand the history. The history is true, where you did have white Europeans come to the so-called New World, and they took land from, the indigenous by warfare, by disease, by any means necessary. But it was a different period, for one, and also the way that the world is now. It's, especially in the U.S., is such a mixing pot now because of how much migration and other cultures, and not just Europeans but Asians and and Arabics and Arabs and all that. This place it doesn't have as much indigenous ties as it once did. There's still tribes, of course, in the United States and all that, and there's still some land that is respected, that is native res territory. But I feel like it's they're so into blaming the white system for all of their shortcomings that it's very difficult to move out of that. And in retrospect, so will the music scene of the indigenous scene. The only way that the indigenous scene could really move past that is if they were just more accepting of the nationalist tendencies, but they really do limit themselves for how far they're going to push it. So, within themselves, they'll say anti-white things and stuff, but just to keep their white fans, they won't, and where like an individual like myself or another bronze nationalist, like we know who the enemy is, and it isn't just, it isn't just anybody who is not my race, they are my enemy. No, I mean, if there's unity through understanding each other's national socialist expectancies and not wanting to cross each other's territory and violate each other's culture, I mean, sure, everything will be okay. But it's something that the indigenous scene it really needs to grow up from, because even if they don't want to be political, it's fine, but as soon as you start aligning with the leftist sympathies and cancel culture, that's where you lose. It's no longer about pride anymore. It's marketing.
Yeah, and we mentioned earlier, or you mentioned the Black Twilight Circle, and I think many listeners are not aware of this movement, but I think it can be compared to Svarta Cirkeln, translated to the Black Circle in Norway, seeming to be a sort of ideological collective sharing similar musical and thematical styles, much like the Black Circle did. And notable bands connected to the Black Twilight Circle, in my opinion, are Volan and Blue Hummingbird on the left, the last of which I know you played a part in as a live musician for a while. And the fact that you played live for them, does that mean that they are not that afraid to mix themselves with radical political ideologies, or how would you view that?
Well, I can't really speak of how they are now. I know for a fact that their lineup has changed from when I was associated with them to the current time they're at now, at this moment. I really can't speak on how much of their convictions have grown, but when I was in the Black Twilight as a live member, there was a little bit of headbutting between me and some of the members. The main vocalist from Blue Hummingbird on the left, his name is Chris, and him and I connected. Out of anyone in the Black Twilight Circle members, him and I became close friends. And as far as political ideology and being able to have the same kind of thoughts and theories about things, he was there, and he was pretty much identical to what I believe, and I learned a lot from him, and I would like to believe that he's learned a little bit from me as well when we were friends. But the other members at that time, there were some white members that were in Black Twilight, even though Black Twilight was showing itself to be some kind of Native American indigenous black metal label. From what I've been told from the mutual friends that we have between the Black Twilight Circle and myself, the mutual friends have told me that the lineup has changed, that everyone who was white in the Black Twilight Circle are essentially not there anymore besides one particular member. So that shows me that some of the grievances that I had with them back in the day when I was a member are being matched with and dealt with. And that's the main reason why we had conflicts, because I was a light member of Blue Hummingbird on the left, and Chris and I, especially Chris, because he was the first one to bring it up to me, said, if we're going to be a true indigenous movement or circle, we really need to not have whites be our live musicians, because, it doesn't look right and it just defeats the whole purpose. And I backed him up 110%. And it was Eddie, who was the main guy from Volon, who pretty much was liberal. When I met him, the first thing he told me was, just to let you know, I'm not cool with that Nazi shit. The very first, that's the exact thing he said to me. And I'll always remember that. But I remember on getting to our friendship, and Eddie used to invite me over his house to go barbecue, and I would go, and he would be listening to Japanese Skinhead, the band Sledgehammer, and he had stacks of Nitberg CDs. So he was a closet Nazi as much as he told me by first conversation that I don't like that Nazi shit. Obviously he did, but I digress from that point. But that just goes to show, the kind of hypocrisy I was dealing with in the Black Twilight. And really it was myself and Chris who had the most hardened ideals. But we had a bad falling out, Chris and I, for reasons I really don't want to get into, other than saying that, I feel that Eddie manipulated him. But now I've had a different view of my conflict with Black Twilight, and through our mutual friends that we both have, I've reached out and I've kind of told them to let Eddie know that this issue that we have with each other needs to come to an end, because the Black Twilight and I, our mutual friends, they've told me many times in private, I wish you guys would end this beef and this conflict you guys have with each other, because it's a shame. I like both your guys' bands or projects with Volon and Maquahuitl, whatever. They would show support. They would want to show support, but it would be awkward for them. And they would always say, it would be great if, Black Twilight and Maquahuitl could play a show together. They would say these kind of uplifting things to kind of end the feud. And I'm pretty much to the point where it's been, well over, I would like to say over 5 or 6 years now that we've had our issues, and it's time to move past it. And from what I hear from our mutual friends is everyone is pretty much wanting to end the feud with me as well, besides one specific member about it. But I hope that maybe listening to this podcast, they know genuinely that I believe it's time, that we stop bickering over this feud we've had with each other. And it's for the better of the scene. It's better for the bronze scene, because as much as they may dislike me or whatever, we're both in the scene together, and it could be so much more if we stopped worrying about each other and either work together or just respect each other's boundaries and everything, because this nothing holds a scene back as much as fighting amongst yourselves, as much as rather fight someone who's actually an enemy than somebody who at the end of the day has the same goals than I do as far as the cultural movement. Because me and myself and Chris, like I said, we saw eye to eye on a lot of things, and it sounds like now that Chris is taking more in charge of Blue Hummingbird on the left and the Black Twilight in general, as far as being, more political side or their more prideful side of their expression. So that, and I know that Volon has been getting a lot of shit lately for now being a nationalist or not a socialist, because I guess he says he's associated with, Operation Werewolf and that whole thing, even though like Operation Werewolf is pretty lukewarm in itself. They're pretty much edgelords that, as far as the imagery and all that. But they do have convictions in their obviously their lifestyle and their weight training and all that. But I've always saw Eddie as the same way, as just being somebody who just wanted to be edgy, who wasn't NS, but sided with liberals and Antifa, but then at the same time, protected JFN. And I heard about that, that Hendrik got jumped or assaulted, or Antifa raided some kind of show that he was at, and Black Twilight defended him or something. That is not something I really expected, because one of the last conversations I had with members of Black Twilight, they criticized me for working with Hendrik. They actually called me a Nazi bootlicker for working with Darker Than Black. So for them to automatically, or to all of a sudden defend, JFN at a show is really, really hysterical to me. But I'm ready to just move forward, and I wish those guys the best of luck with their music. They're great musicians, and I think I've proven myself, and they've proven themselves too in the scene, and it's time to either, make peace and just continue on our way, or just, know where we both stand, and, see if we can work it out.
Yeah, I hope it's resolved and no more brothers' war, as the saying goes.
Well, yeah. Well, that's part of the Bronx culture. If you look at Mesoamerican tribes and stuff, it's always been tribe versus tribe, brother versus brother, and that is the reason why Cortez, when he conquered ancient Mexico, he was able to do it with only 500 Spaniards because they recruited just legions of enemy tribes of the Mexica Empire and just pretty much indigenous race traders, working with their new overlords to overthrow the old overlords. But the old overlords were actually part of their tribal heritage in a sense too. So it's an unfortunate part of history, but that's one side I like to see too. It can't just be, blame all the Spaniards, blame the whites for this. There was an attempt and allegiances made within the Bronze race to help these mysterious white people, skin people that came into the New World.
And like you said, the Black Twilight Circle are very good musicians, and they have very good bands that I think have a lot of potential. So I hope everything moves in the right direction, so to speak. And one big redeeming quality of the guy behind Volan is that he likes the Japanese band Sledgehammer. I was happy to hear that because that's a superb band from Japan.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And recently you announced that your band Maquahuitl will make a split release with the band Hellfire Death Cult, which is a great band name. Could you tell us what we can expect from this release?
Sure. Well, as the Western EP has really shown with Con su pistola en la mano, that I'm pretty versatile when it comes to incorporating my style of black metal with different genres and just doing just other things that are just not normal to what I am normally known for incorporating in my music. But since Hellfire Death Cult is a war metal band and all that, I'm trying to really dig deep and having more brutal riffs, something similar to like the first riff from the song Llamada de Sangre, and just having more like war metal-ish kind of structures. That, and I'm really thinking and been listening to a lot of Graham Bilal's Key lately, and really trying to get in that mindset of just writing, still making good riffs and everything, and making it sound like my music, but trying to incorporate more brutality into it, while still being in E standard tuning, mind you. So I'm really digging deep, and I'm people should just expect the same sound that they know me for, but for me to just expand more on the heavier side of it. And this band, Hellfire Death Cult, I've been friends with them for years. I first met them as a live musician for Blue Hummingbird when I played with Blue Hummingbird in El Paso. We played with Niagara Bliss, Helvetron, Nexel, Hellfire Death Cult, and some other bands as well that I can't really remember off the top of my head. But that's where I first became in contact with those guys and stayed in touch all these years. And it wasn't until At the Altar of Michelampo was released that one of them reached out to me and was like, hey, we should do a split, but if we do so, it should be cultural. And we sat on that for a while, and I just finally decided, what, it's time to do it. Mainly because after this EP, I really just have a couple of more plans for releases, and then I planned on having this project be on hiatus, as far as studio hiatus, for recording new music for a while, just so that I can get some fuel in my head for creating a new album, another full length. But I felt like kicking off something with Hellfire would be a good almost swan song until I come back and get something new to the fans, something that they expect, but something that they don't. So I just hope that when it finally gets recorded here, I believe I'm going to be in the recording studio and traveling in August or September. I haven't solidified a date yet, but once I get everything recorded and finalized, and it's going to be a good split. They've already finished their half of the split. I've listened to it. It sounds what you would expect from this band if you've already heard them, just brutality and just a lot of low end, and it's just grotesque and as far as the sound, but it's going to be good. I think people will enjoy it, and it's a bit weird because here I am being a melodic black metal project, and you having a band that's being a war metal and being very aggressive and down-tuned, and it's going to be two polar opposite bands kind of joining together, and the inspiration kind of comes from the split that Satanic Warmaster and Archgoat did, that Finnish black metal split that they did. Two bands that don't even sound the same, but they're from the same country or same region, and they're pretty much joined on a split to, the way that I like to see it is kind of celebrate Finnish black metal, the two sides of it,
Yeah, it will be very interesting. And speaking of Hellfire, Death Cult, and the Mexican culture that we talked about, there's a Mexican cult of death called Santa Muerte, the Holy Death, that I find very interesting. I mean, I always love this, the ritualistic part of Roman Catholicism, and of course being a very big fan of black metal and everything it comes with, also the different kinds of occult aspects of it. So this seems like maybe like a perfect combination of these two things. Like, can you tell us something about Santa Muerte in Mexican culture, and what is it, and how did it start, and what's the meaning behind it, and how big is it today in Mexican culture? What do you say?
Sure. Well, as far as how much it's grown, I believe that there's about 10 to 12 million active practitioners of Santa Muerte, and that's globally. That isn't just isolated to just Mexico. And Santa Muerte gets a lot of negative views from the Orthodox Catholic Church because of it is the Saint Death, but also or the Holy Death. It's the Santa Muerte is recognized in Mexico as the second most popular saint of Catholicism. So there's a reason for that, as far as why in Mexico and how in Mexico, and how branching off through Chicanos and Mexican Americans who moved to the U.S. from Mexico, how they brought the Santa Muerte worship and culture up north to the U.S. And the Santa Muerte is essentially a combination of Catholicism beliefs with ancient pre-Columbian Mesoamerican beliefs of death. Like a good example would be the festival of the dead, the Dia de los Muertos, that's pretty famous in Mexico, which is, the day after Halloween. It's a day to remember the dead, where the dead visit the living once a year, and you honor them by having an altar of your family member who passed with, example, their favorite alcoholic drink and their favorite dinner plate, and you just have it there in hopes, that their spirit finds it, and they enjoy it before going back into the underworld. And that comes from, ancient Mesoamerican culture, of that being a thing. And when the Catholic missionaries first came to Mexico, they saw this. They saw that in essentially every household there was either a statue of death or of some kind of figure that looked like a skeleton, or some kind of honoring and remembering of the dead. And to the Catholics of that time, it was very strange. It was satanic to them to do that. So they didn't really embrace it, and they referred to it as La Santa Muerte, as far as these structures, these figures dedicated into honoring the dead. So when that translates to Santa Muerte, she is a deity of hope for those who practice the religion. She is a goddess of essentially, our saint of deeds that many may consider bad, and that's the reason why you have Mexican drug lord cartels having altars of her and giving tribute, and also why prostitutes and those who you would see as being like scum of Mexican society, or in general, being worshippers of this religion or this saint, and it's something that has gotten a lot of negativity, but obviously for it to grow to 10 to 12 million, there's more than Santa Muerte than just evil people or people living sketchy lives worshiping this demonic, satanic figure, and there's everyday folks that respect that respect her and that worship her, and it's part of Chicano culture too, man. I mean, you'll see murals of La Santa Muerte. You'll see tattoos on some Chicanos. You'll see jewelry to show that they're members of. There's even don't know the exact name of it, but there's a church of Santa Muerte, Los Angeles, now that I remember it. And when Hellfire was in Los Angeles, I remember that they were on tour with Archgoat, and I directed them to go over to that spot because it was a store where they had a bunch of statues. They wanted to buy one for their stage show and everything. I said, if you're going to find one, you'll find one there, man. So I sent them that way, and it's become very popular, where before in the past in Mexico, any public shrines of her would be destroyed. It was seen as offensive. But my last trip that I took in Mexico on tour back in, I believe I was there 2018, I saw so many altars and figures and respects to her, and it has grown. And I didn't really believe the statistics until I went down there myself, and I started seeing it, because I don't currently live in California anymore. I've actually lived in the state of Tennessee and around the Nashville area. But it's when you visit these regions and you go back, after not being there for so long, you are able to see them with new eyes again. Essentially, when you're there, you're kind of desensitized to it. But once you go back every so often, you really get to see the change. So it's essentially, Santa Muerte is pretty much that. It's something that gives people hope, from protection from witchcraft itself, or reason why drug cartel members or lords will do it is to have a successful drug smuggling. They'll have an altar, and they'll put whatever product that they're smuggling there at the altar with some stacks of money and shots of mezcal or tequila, and ask for blessings. And some prayers for Santa Muerte go from anywhere from like 6 to 8 days, of just constant prayer and asking for protection from those who want to do ill against you. It's of course there's the more occult side of it, where it's tied into Satanism and stuff, but that's mainly because of the Catholic Church. They wanted to have Mexicans in general disassociate from worshiping death, essentially, because that's a very very pagan aspect of our culture. Because of our death worship, we believe in like Mictlan, and we believe in the underworld. But the way that the Mesoamericans in Mexico view death is different from the Europeans, where there's Mexico was essentially a caste system, but the way that you could live a better afterlife is by doing these certain deeds, or living a certain lifestyle. And the best way to die is obviously similar to Vikings, where with Valhalla, we had something similar for warriors that died in warfare in Aztec culture, Mesoamerican culture. And that was where Huitzilopochtli, the Aztec main deity, where he ruled. So with the underworld, with the Aztec or Mayan mythology of Xibalba, the death god is something to be respected, because for those who lived a normal life, that's where you ended up. So it wanted you to do extraordinary things. So you ended up either in a region of hell, or a region of the heavens that that go hand in hand with the way that you lived. So that's where it came from, as far as the pre-Columbian side of it. But to this day, I mean, it's growing, and it's because it's a mixture of Catholicism and paganism. I think that's the reason why within the Latino community it's growing the way that it has.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think worshiping death, that sounds kind of horrible, but in my mind, it's the most natural thing to do, because death is the only certain thing in life. So it's kind of natural to worship it. Like, it's the only thing we know for sure that will happen.
Of course.
So it's Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand from like I said, because by the time the conquistadors came here, when the missionaries came, they were essentially Europeans who already lost their ancestral connection. So them seeing heathens, pagans from the New World, and them doing their rituals and their death worships and honoring war and honoring blood and all that, they really got freaked out, because that European ancestral connection, because of them being converted, it's gone, and they don't have any understanding of what they're seeing. So because of that, in their books and everything like that, they at first wrote it off as, these people are savages, these people are this and that, and they're worshiping death, they're worshiping blood, they're worshiping, and they're mutilating their bodies for their gods, they're ripping each other's hearts out. Like, I can understand how that would freak out somebody who's already, I guess, not connected to like their own ancestral identity, because that's something that I do keep in mind. It's something that I try to explain to others that like to blame white nationalists for for indigenous oppression. It's like, if it was today, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be the case, because these Europeans were coming over to conquer the New World for gold, for pretty much evil greed, and for gain, and they exploited a civilization for that. But now, I mean, National Socialists are not like that, because many see National Socialists, especially white National Socialists, and they see them as just being white supremacists. And there's nothing wrong about being a white supremacist or a bronze supremacist in your own lands. It's when you bring that supremacy, when you expand it beyond your own ancestral lands, where it becomes problematic. And when you do that, when you start oppressing other or start having a supremacy in regions that are not your own, that's where essentially you become Zog, in a sense. So I believe that the National Socialists now know that, and a lot of them know that, each nation has a right to their own pride and expression, and to preserve it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I think we're close to starting to wrap things up. But before we do, is there anything you want to talk about or say to the listeners before we close it up?
Yes, I also wanted to announce that I am doing a second split with a band called Mass Controlled Genocide. They're from Japan, and Mass Controlled Genocide released one of my favorite demos and just releases in general within the last 2 years alone. So I'm very excited to be working with this band. Again, they're from Japan, and it's very melodic. Kind of reminds me of like a Japanese Pest Noir, but with more to it, because he does add a little bit of J-rock and other things that are prevalent in Japanese music, that really shines through when he does it. So I would like my fans to be aware that's coming out, and that's also something I'm going to be recording soon. That and a new Sturmgewehr, doing another Sturmgewehr like I mentioned earlier. So I'm looking forward to doing these things and recording it soon. A lot of the material is already written, and we're going to get it recorded. And lastly, I have a new release coming out, not under Maquahuitl, but under a project that I have with other bronze nationalist brothers that like to keep anonymous for the most part of who we are. But many already know that I'm in the project, which is the reason why I don't mind. But it's called Orden de Sangre y Sol, and it's pretty much old school El Jaran worship, along with maybe like some early Klaxon, like Bonal worship, black punk with REC, and it's a full length that we're doing, and everything's done besides vocals. Vocals are getting done this coming month, and then it's going to get pressed, and announcements will be made on that. But really excited about this Orden de Sangre y Sol release, and it's going to be a good one.
Okay, that sounds extremely promising, and I know that I will keep an eye open for all those releases, and I recommend that all the listeners do as well. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap things up. Thank you so much for participating in this interview, Martin. we look forward to listening to all your future releases, and we would also like to thank the listeners and remind people to like and share the interview in these times of censorship where we get like shadow banned from pretty much everywhere. And we will soon be back with a new episode, and hopefully we will get the chance to do another one in English again very soon. So thanks and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.